I never thought Christmas Eve could feel this cold. Not the kind of cold that nips your fingers or bites your nose. No. This was the kind of cold that settles in your bones when you realize the people who should have cared about you never actually did. Take your stuff and get out, Mia. I'm done. Those were the last words I heard before the door slammed behind me, muffling the music, laughter, and clinking glasses from the Christmas party still going on inside. My ex-boyfriend, his mother, and even the guests watched me with the same expression, like I was an inconvenience, a problem they finally removed. Snowflakes clung to my eyelashes as I stood on the porch, clutching a worn duffel bag and wearing nothing but an oversized sweater, jeans, and my old winter boots. The wind cut through the fabric, sharp and unforgiving. I swallowed the burn in my throat. Christmas Eve, Mia. Seriously? I whispered to myself, trying to laugh but only choking on my breath. I stepped off the porch and into the street. Cars lined both sides, sleek, high-end SUVs and sedans belonging to the same people who just watched me get tossed out like trash. The street glowed with warm yellow Christmas lights, but none of it felt warm to me. The world looked cozy, peaceful, festive. Meanwhile, I felt like the only person on earth who didn't belong anywhere. I kept walking, pulling my sweater tighter around myself. My breath came out in white clouds. The cold slid into my boots, reaching my toes. No plan. No money beyond the wrinkled bills in my back pocket. No home to go back to. Mom was gone. Dad wasn't in my life. My last roommate moved away. And now, Evan had thrown me out because, according to him, I was too much baggage for his new, perfect life. My eyes stung again, but I blinked fast and kept going. Crying wouldn't help. Crying only made the cold feel colder. I reached the corner of Maplewood and Birch when I noticed a man sitting on the ground near the bus stop. Thin jacket, torn gloves, no boots. He sat huddled against the bench, barefoot on the icy concrete, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. His lips were blue. He couldn't have been much older than 30. I slowed, gripping my arms around myself. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked. He looked up with a dazed expression, like he wasn't sure I was real. "I'm fine," he whispered, though his voice trembled. "Just waiting for the bus." But there were no buses running tonight. Christmas Eve routes ended hours ago. My heartbeat quickened. His socks were soaked through. His feet were red. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. The wind whipped through the street again, stinging my skin, and I knew if he spent the night out here he wouldn't make it till morning. Without thinking, I knelt down and unzipped my boots. "Take these," I said. He shook his head immediately, weak but stubborn. No, those are yours. You'll freeze. I'll be okay. You're the one who needs them," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He protested again, but I didn't let him finish. I slipped the boots onto his feet myself. They were big on him, but they covered him, warmed him, protected him. He stared at me like he couldn't understand why anyone would do something like that. "Why?" he whispered. I swallowed. "Because it's Christmas Eve. And nobody deserves to suffer alone." He blinked fast, then wiped his eyes. When I stood up barefoot on the freezing ground, the cold shot through me instantly sharp, brutal, but I forced myself to breathe through it. I tucked my socks inside my sweater sleeves to keep them dry. "Take care of yourself," I said softly. I turned and kept walking. One step, another, then another. The pavement was so cold I couldn't feel my toes anymore. My breath shook. My legs trembled, but I kept going. I reached the middle of the block when headlights suddenly washed over me from behind. Bright, strong, too many to be one car. I turned slowly, and that's when I realized it wasn't one car. It was 19. 19 black BMWs, all identical, all silently rolling toward me, filling the entire street. My heart stopped. Every engine rumbled in perfect sync, like a well-rehearsed formation. The lead car pulled up inches from me, the tinted window lowered halfway. A man's voice, calm, deep, authoritative, slipped through the winter air. "Miss Carter, get in the car." My stomach dropped. I'd never seen these people before. Never heard that voice in my life. "What? Why? "Who are you?" I stammered, stepping back. The man didn't answer my question. Instead, he said quietly, "Please. It's not safe for you to be out here. We've been looking for you." Every muscle in my body tensed. Looking for me? Why? Who were they? What did they want? The man leaned slightly forward, his eyes meeting mine through the shadows. "You just changed everything tonight. You have no idea what you've stepped into. Get in the car, Mia, before someone else finds you first." My breath froze midair. 19 cars, all pointed at me, all waiting. Too forgiving for my own good. The kind of person who gave more than she ever got back. People joked that I had a rescuer personality, but it wasn't funny. It was a wound I learned to hide behind kindness. Growing up, life wasn't warm, but it was quiet. Mom worked 2 jobs. Dad disappeared when I was 7. Money was always tight, but Mom Angela Carter never let me feel poor. She made dollar store candles look like decorations and turned macaroni and cheese into Sunday dinner. When she passed away from a sudden illness a few years after I finished high school, the world felt different, harder, colder, like someone had taken the roof off the house and left me exposed to weather I wasn't ready for. But I didn't break. I worked. I saved. I tried to be the kind of woman Mom would have been proud of. Then I met Evan Hale. At first, Evan seemed like a miracle. He worked in real estate, cocky but charming, the kind of charming that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He had the clean haircut, the pressed shirts, the bright laugh that sounded like someone who'd never struggled a day in his life. And for a while, he made me feel safe. I moved in with him after 9 months. That was my mistake. Because Evan had a mother, Margot Hale. If judgment were a sport, Margot would have gone to the Olympics. She had a way of looking at me like she was trying to locate the price tag on my soul and concluding it wasn't high enough. The Hale family was comfortable. Upper middle class, old money, the kind of people who bought wine by the crate and argued about interior designers like it was world politics. Their Christmas parties looked like something out of a glossy magazine. I tried to blend in. I tried too hard. I became quieter, smaller, more careful with every word, more grateful for every crumb of approval. But no matter how much I bent myself into a shape that fit their world, Margot never stopped treating me like I was temporary. Like I was a stain she kept trying to scrub out of her son's life. And Evan slowly changed too. It started with small comments. "You don't have to wear that sweater, you know. My mom notices things. Maybe don't mention your job at the cafe to the guests. They don't really get that kind of thing." After Hayes, "Could you not talk so loudly?" My uncle's sensitive to noise. Small, sharp things. Little jabs wrapped like suggestions. At first, I brushed them off. I thought I was helping, being supportive. But the more I shrank, the more confident Margot became. And the more confident she became, the more Evan started acting like I was a burden. By Thanksgiving, he was treating me like I was lucky just to stand beside him at family events. By December, I wasn't even sure he loved me anymore. The only person who ever made sense to me was Clara, my best friend since high school. Loud, sarcastic, funny without trying. She was the only person who told me I was losing myself. "You're fading, Mia," she said once during a phone call. "You sound like you're living someone else's life." But I didn't listen. Because hope, especially hope tied to love, is stubborn. Deep down, I still believed Evan would remember why he loved me in the first place. I believed his mom would warm up eventually. I believed giving everything I had was the way to fix things. But all it did was drain me. 3 days before Christmas Eve, the tension in the Hale household grew thicker. Evan barely spoke to me. Margot made remarks about standards and image. And the more I tried to stay out of the way, the more wrong everything I did seemed to be. When I accidentally spilled cocoa on one of Margot's embroidered napkins, her face curled like I'd committed a crime. "That's why we don't hand those to guests," she whispered sharply, like I was a child who had failed a test I didn't know I was taking. Evan didn't defend me. He didn't even look up. I should have seen what was coming. Maybe part of me did. Maybe that's why my heart felt heavy the whole week, like my body was trying to protect me from a future I didn't want to face. On Christmas Eve, the Hale house buzzed with guests, neighbors, real estate partners. Margot's friends from her charity boards. Laughter and jazz music filled the hallways. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, adjusting the sleeves of my sweater, trying to blend into the holiday glow. That's when I overheard it. Margot's voice, low and sharp, drifting from the dining room. "She's not our kind of person, Evan. You can't pretend forever. She will only hold you back." And early 5-2, and Evan's answer. Quiet, tired, but clear. "You're right, I know." My hands went cold even before the snow hit them. But I didn't run. I didn't confront them. I just stood there, frozen, letting the truth slide under my skin. Evan wasn't mine anymore. Maybe he never had been. And yet, even with everything falling apart, even with my heart cracking in ways I didn't know a heart could crack, I still didn't expect what would happen only hours later. I didn't expect to be thrown out. Someone powerful enough to send 19 black BMWs to find me the second I walked away. My story didn't begin with the cars surrounding me. It began long before that with a girl who kept giving until something finally gave back. If someone had asked me before all this what rising tension felt like, I would have described it as something dramatic like thunder before a storm, or the moment a movie soundtrack darkens. But in real life, tension is quieter. It creeps. It whispers. It sneaks into ordinary days and everyday conversations until the air around you feels heavy, and you can't remember when you last took a full breath. For me, the tension started weeks before Christmas Eve, long before the cold night when everything shattered. It began with the little changes in Evan, changes subtle enough that someone in love could pretend not to see them, at least for a while. He used to greet me when he walked in the door. A simple, "Hey babe," or "How was your day?" Nothing grand, nothing poetic but warm. But by mid-December, the warmth was gone. He'd come home tired, drop his keys on the counter, scroll his phone, and barely look in my direction. If I asked about his day, he'd just shrug. Busy, tiring. Can we not talk about it? The first time, I understood. The second time, I tried harder. By the 20th time, I knew something was wrong. But I told myself it was the holidays. Stress, work, family pressure, anything but the truth. The next sign came from Margot. She had always been particular: tight posture, tight smile, tight control over everything around her. But in December, she became icy, not openly hostile, just quietly disapproving of every breath I took. If I wore the wrong slippers, oh, interesting choice. If I cooked something basic, that's rustic. If I laughed at something Evan said, she'd look at me like laughter was a luxury item I didn't earn. Then came the Christmas party planning. "Don't worry," she said with a smile that wasn't a smile. "We'll handle the decorations. You just stay comfortable." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a polite way of saying, "Stay out of the way. You don't belong in the picture." And Evan, who once defended me without hesitation, now said nothing. One night, while the three of us were setting up ornaments, Margot gently adjusted the bow I'd tied on a wreath. "Not like that, dear." I stepped back. "Oh, sorry." I thought. "It's fine," she said, already undoing everything I'd done. "Some things are just better left to people who know the look we're going for." I felt the sting immediately. And what hurt even more was that Evan saw it. He saw how her words hit me, and he just looked away. I laughed it off because that's what I did. I smoothed things over. I didn't want to be a problem, but something inside me tightened that night. A small knot. A warning. The next week, it became clearer. I started noticing Evan's phone face down. His sudden reluctance for me to sit beside him when he worked. His jumpiness when messages came in. Once, while he was showering, his phone lit up on the nightstand. A message preview. "Did you tell her yet?" My stomach dropped. I didn't pick up the phone. Didn't scroll. Didn't snoop. But that single question echoed in my head all night. Tell me what? Tell me who? Tell me why? When he came to bed, I tried to ask, "Is everything okay with us?" He sighed. "Mia, can we not do this? It's late." Not "yes, of course." Not "what's wrong?" Not "let's talk." Just annoyance. Like my feelings were an inconvenience. That was the moment I realized the quiet suffering I'd been dealing with wasn't in my head. I was losing him, piece by piece, day by day, but I still wasn't ready to face the truth. 2 days later, the tension cracked open a little more. Evan and I were getting ready for a dinner event. I stood by the mirror, fixing my hair, trying my best to look polished the way Margot liked. He came up behind me. Instead of complimenting me, he frowned. "You're wearing that?" I blinked at the mirror. "Yeah, why?" "It's fine. Just my coworkers' wives dress differently. Maybe try something nicer." "Nicer?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Just take it as advice." Advice. Correction. Another shove toward the version of me he wanted. I felt small, but I still changed. This time into a soft blue sweater dress, simple, neat, safe. Something Mom would have liked, something I hoped Evan would appreciate. When I came out, he nodded. Not smiled. Not complimented. Just nodded. That tiny gesture, so cold, so detached, was the moment I finally understood that the person I was trying to keep wasn't the man I'd met. And then there was Clara, my lifeline. She called me late one night after her shift at the hospital. "How's the gingerbread castle going?" She joked. I tried to smile. "It's less of a castle and more psychological war." She grew quiet. "Mia, talk to me." And for the first time, I let some truth out. "I feel like I don't exist in that house anymore. Like I'm just furniture." "What did Evan do?" "He didn't do anything," I said softly. "That's the problem." She exhaled sharply. "You deserve better than silence, Mia." I knew she was right. I knew. But knowing and accepting are different things. "He used to try," I whispered, "and now I'm trying enough for both of us." Clara's voice softened. "Mia, trying alone isn't a relationship. It's emotional labor." Her words settled in my chest. We talked for an hour. She made me laugh, made me feel seen. But when I hung up, the house was still quiet, still heavy, still cold. And for the first time, I felt the distance between Evan and me like something physical, a wall I couldn't climb. As Christmas Eve approached, the feeling grew worse. Every moment at the house felt like walking on glass, watching every word, every gesture, every breath. I knew Margot was waiting for me to make a mistake, and I knew Evan was tired of pretending we were okay. I kept hoping something would shift back to normal. But life doesn't rewind just because you wish it would. The morning of Christmas Eve started tension-free, at least on the surface. Snow drifted outside. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon. Holiday music played softly, but even the music felt muted. When I walked into the kitchen, Evan barely looked at me. "Morning," I said. "Hey," he answered without turning. I poured coffee, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. The silence stretched, long and thin. Finally, I whispered, "Are we okay?" He closed the cabinet slowly. Too slowly. "I don't want to talk about this today," he said. I nodded, because what else was there to do? But inside, something cracked again. Around noon, guests began arriving. The house filled with chatter and warmth that didn't reach me. Everyone seemed excited and festive. I pasted on a smile, moving through the rooms like a ghost. Around 4 p.m., I overheard Margot speaking to her sister in the hallway. I knew she wouldn't last. Evan needs someone who elevates him, not drags behind him. My throat tightened. I walked away quietly. Not long after, I bumped into Evan near the dining table. He looked irritated, like my presence threw him off balance. "Mia," he said in a hushed tone, "can you not wander around so much? Mom's stressed already." Wander. Like I wasn't supposed to exist in the same space. I wanted to ask him what I had done wrong. I wanted to ask him why he didn't care anymore. But I swallowed everything. Swallowed the fear. Swallowed the hurt. Swallowed the truth. Because already, I could feel it the moment the tension would snap wasn't far off. And even though I didn't know what was coming next, I could feel the air shifting around me, the same way the sky changes before snowfall. A quiet warning. A slow tightening. A storm building. A storm that would hit me harder than anything I'd ever lived through. Because the next section, what would happen hours later, wasn't just heartbreak. It was the breaking point that would send me barefoot into the snow. and directly into the path of 19 black BMWs. The night that changed everything began with a single sentence. As the emergency room doors slammed open, I rushed a stretcher inside my hands, still trembling after performing CPR in the ambulance. The hospital lights were harsh, sterile, and unforgiving, but nothing felt as cold as what I was about to witness. I expected the surgical team to gather. I expected the attending doctor to take over. I expected my husband, Dr. Evan, to step in as usual. But instead, he stepped back. He didn't look at the patient. He didn't even check the vitals. His eyes were fixed on me. And then he said it. "We can't operate. Step away from the stretcher." The whole room froze. The nurses exchanged confused glances. The anesthesiologist lowered his mask. Startled, I felt my heartbeat spike all the way to my throat. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "He needs immediate surgery." But Evan didn't answer me. He turned to the team instead. "Everyone out. That's an order." No one moved. Not because they were brave, but because they were stunned. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't normal. This wasn't medicine. It was something else. "Doctor," the head nurse whispered, "the patient will not survive if we delay." Evan shot her a look so sharp she immediately bowed her head. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. My pulse hammered harder with every second, and then before I could even breathe, 2 security guards stepped into the room. Not summoned by me. Not summoned by any nurse. Summoned by him. "Escort her out," Evan said quietly. "Her. Me." My stomach dropped. "What? Why?" One of the guards hesitated. "Sir, she's the one who brought the patient in." He cut him off. "She is interfering with a confidential case." Confidential? What case? What was he talking about? I reached for the patient again, but the guards blocked me, gently but firmly. And then everything hit me at once. The nurse who grabbed me earlier and whispered, "Hide, it's a trap." The unexplained tension in Evan's voice the past few weeks. The late-night phone calls he refused to explain. The sudden strictness around certain emergency cases. None of it made sense until this moment. "Evan," I said, quieter, weaker, "look at me. Just tell me what's going on." For the first time that night, he looked straight into my eyes. There was guilt. There was fear. And there was something else, something colder. "You shouldn't have brought that patient here," he said. "That patient?" The words stabbed deeper than any scalpel. The stretcher trembled as the man on it gasped for air, fighting for minutes he didn't have. And my husband, my partner, my colleague was refusing to act. I stepped forward again, and that was when it happened. Evan grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to warn. "Walk away," he said. "For your own good." For my own good? Tears burned behind my eyes, not because of fear, but because of the clarity I was forced to face. The betrayal wasn't just professional. It wasn't just medical. It was personal. The husband I trusted, the doctor I respected, the man I believed I knew, was hiding something from me. Something dangerous enough to risk a patient's life, dangerous enough to silence me. And as the guards escorted me out, and the OR doors slammed shut behind me, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was the breaking point. The second the OR doors locked, I felt something inside me snap, not in fear, but in clarity. Whatever this was, whatever secret Evan was hiding, it wasn't just about one patient. It was bigger, and if I stayed silent, more people could be in danger. I refused to let that happen. I hurried down the hallway, searching for anyone who wasn't under his influence, and found Nurse Lynn, the one who had whispered earlier, "Hide. It's a trap." She was waiting in a supply room, pacing anxiously. The moment she saw me, she shut the door behind us and lowered her voice. "You weren't supposed to bring him here," she said. "They were looking for him." I stared at her. "Who's they? And why is my husband involved?" Her lips trembled. She wasn't scared of me, she was scared of whoever was behind all this. "I don't know everything," she said. "But I know this. That patient isn't just a trauma case. He's connected to something outside the hospital, a case the administration sealed. Anyone who touches it gets pulled in." "Pulled in how?" I asked. She hesitated again. enough to make my stomach twist. Before she could answer, the overhead speaker crackled. Security alert in Wing B. All staff remain in assigned areas. Lynn went pale. That's them. They know you brought him. You need to go now. No, I said firmly. I'm not running. I'm finding out the truth. She grabbed my arm. Then you need to see this. From her pocket, she pulled something small and metallic, a key card. But not just any card. It was red. In our hospital, red meant one thing: restricted access, administration level, medical archives sealed by the director. Where did you get this? I whispered. You didn't hear it from me, she said shakily. But you'll find what you're looking for in Archive Room 03. Just be careful. If anyone catches you, especially the doctors tied to this case, you won't get another chance. My heart pounded. Even touching this card felt like I was stepping onto forbidden territory. But I had no choice. If my husband had crossed a line, I needed proof. I slipped the card into my pocket and headed toward the elevators. They were guarded, of course, so I took the stairs, my footsteps echoing through the dim, quiet shaft. When I reached the basement, the air felt heavier, colder. Archive Room 03 sat behind a reinforced door marked with bright yellow warnings. Authorized staff only. No entry without security clearance. My hands shook as I swiped the card. Beep. It is a parted sign. The patient's name matched the man I brought in earlier. My pulse spiked. I flipped through the documents. There were photos of injuries taken days before I found him. Reports of him being followed. Notes about a group watching him outside the hospital. And then, at the very end, annotations in handwriting I recognized instantly. My husband's. Priority. If he returns, notify me immediately. No surgery until further instruction. I felt the room tilt. No surgery. Not because he couldn't be saved, but because someone wanted to delay treatment. Someone wanted him unreachable. And my husband was complying. Before I could breathe, a shadow moved behind me. A quiet voice said, "I told you not to come here." I turned and found Evan standing in the doorway, eyes cold, jaw tight, as if I'd just crossed a line I could never step back from. This was it. The turning point. The moment when the truth could no longer be ignored, hidden, or softened. The moment I realized the man blocking the exit was no longer just my husband. He was someone I couldn't trust. Evan stepped forward, closing the archive door behind him with a soft, deliberate click. A quiet sound, but it felt like a lock sealing shut. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was worse controlled, measured, like he had already rehearsed this moment. I kept the file pressed against my chest. "What is this, Evan? Why were you tracking that patient? Why were you trying to stop his surgery?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Because it wasn't safe." "For who?" I shot back. "For him? Or for you?" He didn't answer. That silence, that was the moment I knew. My husband had been lying to me for much longer than tonight. "You followed him before I brought him in," I said. "You wrote these notes. You told the nurses to delay his care. That for traditions of. Because that man isn't who you think he is," Evan replied sharply. "He's connected to something that could destroy everything: our jobs, our future, this hospital." I stared at him. "Our future? You did this for us?" "No. I did it because I didn't have a choice." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're helping him, but you're playing right into their hands." "Whose hands?" He hesitated. And then he said a name that made my stomach twist. A private medical board member. A man known for his charity donations, his influence, and his ability to make problems disappear. "You're working with him?" I whispered. Evan clenched his jaw. "I was told if the patient talks, if he survives long enough to identify who hurt him, an investigation will begin, one that leads straight to the hospital, straight to the board." "And you?" I asked softly. Another silence. But this one said everything. "Evan, what did you do?" Before he could answer, a loud beep echoed through the archive. Someone else had used a keycard outside. He tensed. "They're coming. Give me the file." "No. Give it to me," he repeated, firmer. You don't understand what you're involved in. I swallowed hard. And you think I'm going to trust you after tonight? He reached for the folder. I stepped back. It happened fast, too fast. Hands grabbing. The file slipping. Papers scattering across the floor. And in that messy scramble, one photo slid toward my foot, a security still showing the injured man standing outside an operating room door. Next to him, someone wearing scrubs. Someone familiar. My husband. I froze. You were with him, I breathed, before the attack, before he ended up bleeding in the street. Evan's face tightened. It isn't what it looks like. You were the last person he saw before someone went after him. You need to stop, he whispered urgently. You're about to walk into something you can't walk back out of. But I wasn't listening anymore. Piece by piece, the truth snapped together like a cruel puzzle. Evan wasn't just following the patient. He wasn't just delaying surgery. He wasn't just protecting the hospital. He was involved. Directly. Secretly. And dangerously. A sudden pounding shook the archive door. Open up, security. My heart jumped. Evan grabbed my wrist. If you go with them, they'll pin everything on you. They'll erase you from the system before sunrise. You need to leave the files. Walk out with me. Act like you don't know anything. I can't do that, I whispered. You can, he insisted. You have to. For us. There is no us, I said quietly. His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something I'd never seen in him before. Fear. Not fear for me. Fear of losing control. Asterisk. The pounding grew louder. Keycards, swiping. Voices shouting. They can't find you with this, he hissed. But he was too late. Because I had already made my choice. I grabbed the single photo that showed him with the patient, folded it, and slid it into my pocket. Evan looked stunned. Don't do this, he whispered. I stepped back from him, pulse shaking, breath shallow. You wanted to hide the truth, I said. I'm going to expose it. The door burst open, security rushing in. And in that split second, the twist snapped fully into place. My husband wasn't trying to protect me. He was trying to protect himself from something he had done, or someone he had crossed. And now, I was the one holding the evidence that could take him down. I walked out of the hospital archives, the photo burning a hole in my pocket, my hands trembling. Outside, the fog had rolled back in, curling around the streetlights like it was alive, watching. For the first time all night, I felt a strange calm. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't trapped anymore. I held the leverage, the truth, the choice. The world hadn't changed. But I had. I found a quiet corner in the hospital parking garage, leaned against my car, and pulled out my phone. Every word I typed, every email I sent, carried the weight of months of deceit, betrayal, and sleepless nights. I sent copies to journalists I trusted, to oversight boards, to whistleblower channels that would keep me protected. Then I called the only person I knew would understand, Claudia. Her voice came through instantly, steady and unwavering. You're doing the right thing, she said. This isn't just about revenge. This is about justice. Her words hit me like a wave. Justice. Not for me, but for every person who had been manipulated, silenced, discarded. And suddenly, the fear that had pinned me down, fear of my husband, fear of retaliation, fear of exposure started to melt away. By morning, the fallout began. Evan's office was sealed. Hospital board meetings were disrupted. Security logs, emails, and surveillance footage, all now exposed, pointed directly to him. Whispers became headlines. The story broke like a storm. Insider manipulations in city hospital surgery, investigation underway. People I had feared would turn on me instead rallied. Nurses, residents, even administrative staff began reaching out, sharing their own accounts, their own fears finally finding a voice. I watched it unfold from my apartment, the same one I had rented with only a week's deposit, yet now feeling like the command center for change. By the end of the week, Evan was suspended indefinitely, pending investigation. His carefully constructed network of intimidation unraveled faster than he ever anticipated, and the patient whose life had been put at risk was now safely recovering, cared for without hidden agendas, without fear. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I just breathed. The tension, the dread, the silent nights of second-guessing myself, all of it began to lift. I realized something important. The same strength that had carried me through being thrown out on Christmas Eve, the courage to give my boots to a stranger without expecting anything in return, had brought me here. The act of selfless bravery, that single spark, had grown into a flame strong enough to illuminate lies, dismantle manipulation, and reclaim power. People called, emails poured in, offers for interviews, opportunities to speak, to consult, to teach others about ethics, courage, and accountability. For the first time, my voice mattered. Not because it was loud, not because it was spectacular, but because it was true. And that day, as the city buzzed below my window, I realized power wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about titles. It was about choice, the courage to act when no one else would, even when fear screams louder than reason. For the first time in years, I felt unshakable. The world had shifted, yes, but more importantly, I had shifted. From victim to actor, from powerless to responsible, from reactive to deliberate. And all it took was one choice, one small act of integrity, one decision to stand, instead of letting others decide my fate. The news spread like wildfire. Evan's suspension became a full investigation. Board members he had once intimidated were finally speaking up. Colleagues who had stayed silent out of fear came forward, revealing the extent of his manipulation, the cover-ups, the dangerous shortcuts he'd taken. I didn't need to lift a finger beyond what I had already done. The universe, or maybe just karma, was handling the rest. Within weeks, Evan's carefully curated reputation crumbled. He was stripped of leadership roles, denied professional licenses, and his name became synonymous with deceit in the hospital community. People who once admired him now avoided him, whispering behind his back in the hallways he once dominated. And it wasn't just him. The hospital's corrupt board members faced scrutiny, investigations, and resignations. Donors withdrew funding. Contracts evaporated. The entire network of power that had once threatened lives began to unravel. Meanwhile, the patient whose life he had tried to control recovered fully. Doctors and nurses who had felt powerless now felt empowered, inspired to speak up when something wasn't right. A single act of courage had created a ripple that strengthened the entire system. I walked through the hospital corridors one morning, months later, and noticed something small but significant. Nurses greeting me warmly, residents nodding with respect, staff sharing smiles that had been absent before. Justice had arrived quietly, but undeniably. And somewhere in the background, Evan, stripped of his influence, faced the consequences he had tried so desperately to avoid. No PR spin, no manipulation, no silver-tongued lies, just accountability. It was poetic. Not in a dramatic, loud way, but in that quiet, unmistakable sense of balance being restored. I didn't feel satisfaction in revenge. I felt relief. Relief that fairness had found its way, that the people who had been hurt would finally be safe, and that the system could begin to heal. Karma, I realized, isn't about anger or punishment. It's about cause and effect. Every choice, every betrayal, every selfish act eventually catches up. And the universe has a way of letting the truth surface, even if it takes time. That Christmas Eve, when I had given my boots to a stranger with no expectation in return, I had unknowingly set the first domino in motion. One act of selfless kindness had built the foundation for a chain of events that not only changed my life, but ensured that those who had caused harm faced the consequences they deserved. And as I watched the hospital begin to recover, the corridors fill with warmth, laughter, and genuine care, I finally understood. Sometimes karma isn't loud. It's subtle, slow, and inevitable, and it always comes full circle. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the hospital windows, glinting off the polished floors, the stainless steel handrails, and the glass panels that lined the corridors. I stood at the entrance of the newly renovated wing, taking it all in clean, bright, orderly. This was no longer just a hospital. It was a place of hope, accountability, and second chances. Months had passed since that frozen night on Christmas Eve. Months since I had given away my boots to a stranger in need. Months since the world seemed to collapse beneath me. And yet, here I was, standing taller than ever, not because of titles, money, or influence, but because of integrity, courage, and the simple, unwavering choice to do the right thing when no one was watching. I remembered every moment of that night, the icy wind biting my cheeks, the fog wrapping around the street like a shroud, my heart pounding as I realized I had nowhere to go, and yet I gave away the last warmth I had the boots on my feet. That choice had defined everything that came after. The hospital board had been cleaned up, corrupt administrators removed, and new policies put in place to protect patients and staff alike. Evan, who had once wielded power like a weapon, was now facing legal consequences, professional disbarment, and the quiet judgment of a community he had betrayed. I didn't gloat. I simply let the universe handle him, the way it always does when truth and integrity are on your side. But the real victory, the one that left my chest full and my hands steady, was the people I had helped. The patients, the nurses, the staff, and the families who felt seen, protected, and heard. Because sometimes, real power isn't about wealth, or revenge, or recognition. It's about creating a space where people can thrive, survive, and believe in kindness again. And yet, the echoes of Christmas Eve still lingered in my memory. My parents, my sister, the ones who had disowned me, mocked me, and treated me like I was disposable. Months later, they came to me. Not because they had changed, or because they suddenly valued integrity over money. They came because they had hit rock bottom, their fortune lost in risky investments, their pride shattered, their plans exposed as illusions. Viva, smaller somehow without the armor of designer labels and social media followers, looked at me with a mix of fear and pleading. My parents, older, humbler, and broken in ways I could never have imagined, followed silently. I did not open my arms. I did not forgive in the traditional sense. Forgiveness does not mean inviting the same pain back into your life. It means releasing it from your own heart. I offered them something far more valuable: guidance, not bailouts; resources, not handouts; lessons, not luxury. I handed them connections to financial advisors, literacy programs, and support networks. I guided them toward the tools they needed to rebuild on their own, to learn from the mistakes that had destroyed their wealth and trust. And then, I stepped back. No dramatic speeches, no lingering grudges, just space. For me, for them, for life to continue. Because that's what it had all been about, really. From the frozen streets on Christmas Eve to the chaos of betrayal, to the quiet power of selfless choice, it had always been about reclaiming control over my own life. I had been thrown out, cast aside, made invisible, but I had chosen kindness over bitterness, action over inaction, truth over deception. And in that choice, I discovered my own power. I didn't need to dominate. I didn't need revenge. I only needed courage, persistence, and an unwavering belief that doing right, even when invisible, mattered more than anything else. Later that evening, I walked into the hospital's new rooftop garden. A gentle breeze lifted strands of my hair as I looked out over the city, the skyline glowing with streetlights and reflections on glass buildings. Families laughed in the courtyard below. Children ran freely, their shouts echoing like music against the walls. A little boy, no older than 7, ran up to me, holding a small paper crane he had folded. "For you," he said, his voice full of excitement. I knelt down, taking it carefully. "Thank you," I said genuinely, heart swelling. "This means so much." And in that moment, I understood fully. Legacy isn't built from wealth, or revenge, or titles. Legacy is built from the lives you touch, from the hands you lift, from the kindness you offer when it costs you everything, and still you give. I stood, letting the crane flutter in the breeze. The city stretched below me, alive with possibility, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely, home. The people who had abandoned me were no longer shadows haunting my past. They were simply reminders reminders that life can be cruel, that betrayal can hurt, that loss can feel unbearable. But they were also proof that growth, courage, and kindness are stronger than pain, more enduring than betrayal, and far more powerful than any fortune. I smiled softly, letting the wind brush across my face. Because I had survived, I had grown, I had chosen right when it mattered most, and the world, in its quiet, unfolding way, had rewarded that choice beyond measure.